September 2015, Dallas, Texas. Police are called to a garage in a high-end apartment complex. A body has been found.
It was almost like an execution-style murder. I mean, she had no warning that this was coming.
The bullet entered in the back of her skull and actually came out underneath her chin area.
But the profile of the victim and the manner of death lead investigators to believe that this is more than a random shooting.
I felt like there was more to the story. There was no random circumstance that caused this murder, that they were there for a specific reason and they were waiting on our victim.
What detectives soon uncover is a complex conspiracy.
Just the lengths that someone would go to try to get back with an ex-boyfriend.
I don't think she even thought about covering her tracks. It was all about getting this done. This focus of, I need to get Kendra Hatcher out of the way so I can get Ricky back.
Unfortunately, there are people in this world who would kill another human being and not give it a second thought.
This is the story of the tragic murder of Kendra Hatcher, the detailed and methodical search for her killer, and a motive which police soon learn was triggered by jealousy and rage. It's just after 8 p.m. on the evening of September 2nd, 2015. Police respond to a 911 call from a luxurious high-rise apartment building in Dallas's Uptown.
Dallas 911, where's emergency?
Hi, someone just got shot in the parking lot of the Gables Park 17. All I heard was screaming and then a loud pop, and then I saw her laying on the floor and there was like blood coming out of her neck. The people, they had a mask on, and I think it was a black Jeep Cherokee.
I responded to that and was told by the officers that were securing the scene outside that there was someone that was deceased inside of the parking lot.
I saw a white Toyota Camry pulled in a parking space. The driver's side of the vehicle, the victim was laying on the ground. There was a pool of blood around her head.
She was dressed in black doctor's scrubs, and her name was embroidered on the front of her shirt.
It was definite that she had been shot. Next to the body, there was a magazine from a handgun, a spent round, and a shell casing.
The police request the attendance of the medical examiner.
The medical examiner did arrive at the scene, and he was able to confirm that she was deceased from one gunshot wound to the head. The bullet entered in the back of her skull and actually came out underneath her chin area.
The police have already been able to confirm the identity of the deceased.
The officers, prior to my arrival, checked the license plate on the car, and that came back as Kendra Hatcher being the owner of the vehicle, which matched what was on her shirt also.
Detectives now begin to examine what evidence they can find.
The cell phone at the scene was given to the homicide investigators. Obviously, they wanted to find out what numbers had been recently called or dialed on that phone, what messages had come in. The pistol magazine, which was also found at the scene with 13 live rounds in it, I took back to our crime scene lab and processed for latent prints.
We looked for her purse, and we found out that her purse was missing. And so we just began doing our normal course of investigation, looking for witnesses and also video cameras inside the parking garage.
Officers establish Kendra Hatcher's last movements.
I found out that Kendra was actually a resident in that building and that she was on her way home from work. September 2nd was her last day at work for a few days because she was going on a vacation.
Kendra's fiancé, Ricky Paniagua, soon arrives.
One of the most painful parts of this whole story that I think of is that Ricky, the fiance, was coming back into the apartment complex with dinner, and there was something going on. There were like police ropes and sirens and things were going on. He didn't know what was going on.
After speaking with him for a couple minutes, Ricky was able to tell me that him and Kendra had been dating for several months, and he was meeting Kendra at her apartment that evening to have dinner. Once he found out that we found Kendra deceased, you could just see like just the color go from his body. He almost went into a state of shock once he was able to connect the dots.
Police begin to piece together more information about Kendra.
She had a very humble life growing up. Her mother owned a blanket shop in Springfield, Illinois. She was a cheerleader in high school, and she also was very devoted to her religion.
She was a rising star in her world of dentistry. She was someone that helped many, many people.
She worked with a clinic in the mid-cities of between Dallas and Fort Worth that specialized in lower-income kids because she wanted to help kids.
She also volunteered her time giving back to poor children in South America, donating her abilities as a dentist and her time and her effort to help kids that couldn't afford dentistry.
In recent months, Ricky and Kendra have become very close.
She had told her family that she was super excited about meeting this guy. She said that they're clicking and that, you know, he's a dermatologist and that they would probably end up moving in a year or so after his residency ended. And she just seemed to be really super happy and excited about life.
The most immediate clue to what has happened to Kendra comes from the footage captured on the apartment complex's security camera system.
On the surveillance footage, we were able to see the victim come in to the parking garage and go to a normal parking space. We also found a footage of an older model Jeep Cherokee. This Jeep Cherokee was waiting in the visitor portion of the parking garage, and they followed another vehicle in and parked in a parking space before our victim got there.
She started to get out of her car. An assailant walked up and basically executed her, shot her in the head, took her purse, and fled.
The individual walked back to the back seat of the Jeep. The Jeep went out the wrong direction in the parking garage, made a U-turn, and then they exited.
But there are limitations to what the police can see on the CCTV.
After looking at the video, there was no way we could tell what kind of license plate was on that vehicle. And we had information that it may have been a paper tag.
Police feel the public might be able to help them.
They made the decision to release that tape to the public and say, hey, has anybody seen this vehicle, or do you know what's going on, or this is, you know, this is very much of interest to us. And I think that was very, very key for them because that helped move the case along.
I felt like there was more to the story. There was no random circumstance that caused this murder, that they were there for a specific reason and they were waiting on our victim.
Police have some security footage, a murdered woman and a distraught fiancé. But they have little else to point to a motive for what clearly is the clinical killing of Kendra Hatcher. Dallas, Texas, 2015. Police are investigating the murder of 35-year-old dentist Kendra Hatcher. Most of the incident has been caught on security footage. Detectives have released the tape publicly in the hopes it might elicit a response and information. It does.
The media interest, it did help the case, obviously. I mean, when the news footage of the Jeep Cherokee leaving the garage, you know, that jump-started the investigation when the owner called in.
The man is Jose Luis Ortiz, and he claims he lent his Jeep to a friend, Brenda Delgado.
Jose called in and said that he loaned his Jeep the same day of the murder to Brenda Delgado. Jose actually gave us a phone number for Brenda, and we called her. She told us, you know, I'm house sitting for a friend over in Irving, and I don't have a ride, but if you can come pick me up, I'll come talk with you.
With this connection to the vehicle, Brenda Delgado immediately becomes a person of interest. Detectives try to establish more about her and her background.
Her parents immigrated from Mexico to America, so she still had dual citizenship in both countries. They were good working class folks. She graduated from an area high school. There wasn't money to go to college, so she started working. She got interested in the dental field. She was coming back to school and slowly finishing dental hygienist school when she was in her 30s.
The interesting thing about Brenda Delgado is that she is the former girlfriend of Ricky, the fiancé of Kendra Hatcher.
She had been with Mr. Paniagua several times, dating him. They broke it off. He then met Kendra Hatcher.
Brenda was, by all means, crazy in love with him, fascinated by him. They met the first time, got together, had a relationship. He broke it off. And then at some point after that, they started to get together casually. I would assume that that meant they were probably hooking up, but it wasn't anything more. It wasn't a romantic relationship or a long-term relationship.
However, Brenda doesn't see things that way.
There were times where she would seem emotionally unstable. There would be times where she would be overly clingy and just kind of overly attached to him. And I felt like, you know, that kind of fit in with the theme on this case, more so than a robbery.
It appears her view of the relationship has become obsessive.
He would be out for a run on Katy Trail here in Dallas, and she would suddenly run into him, you know, make it appear that it was coincidental when in fact it wasn't. She was stalking him. So I think at that point she was just obsessed and she wanted to get him back any way she could.
For police, it's time to get face-to-face with Brenda Delgado.
Brenda gets called in for a voluntary interview, and she's cooperative. The Dallas police, smart as a bug, those folks taped everything.
Brenda gives the detectives her version of how she spent Wednesday, September 2nd, the day Kendra Hatcher was murdered.
Wednesday, I was in Carrollton,
Okay.
and I studied from maybe 12 all the way to like about 6. And then from 6 we went to Fuzzy's. We had some tacos at Fuzzy's in Carrollton.
Okay. Who were you studying with?
Billy, this guy, a classmate.
Okay. So how'd you get to Carrollton?
I got a ride to Carrollton.
Okay. Who gave you a ride?
Who gave me a ride? My friend, Crystal.
Crystal. She told me that early that morning she met up with her friend Crystal. They were having some problems with their vehicle, and she took it to Jose's shop. Jose's a mechanic. Jose looked at it and told her that he needed to work on it, and she borrowed his Jeep. She said that she had a study date that day with some friends, and Crystal dropped her off at a public library, and she spent most of the day studying. She also told me that the library had cameras, and it also had a sign-in log that I could check for her signature.
This level of detail immediately raises a red flag.
Most people don't pay attention to locations having cameras or sign-in logs. It was like it was already pre-formatted.
Brenda can also supply very specific details about where she was at the time of Kendra's death.
And I go to Chili's.
How'd you get to the Chili's?
Billy took me.
Billy gave you a ride at Chili's? Okay.
I have the receipt in my bag. I can tell you exactly. That's all my clothes down.
Okay.
She probably figured if she just showed the receipt, an officer would say, sure, you weren't there, thank you, and that would be over. Fortunately, that's not the way it works in the world of crime.
Most people, when they come down and talk about murder, they're really nervous and kind of taken back. Either they're going to be overwhelmed emotionally because someone lost their life. They're going to be afraid because they're being questioned at a homicide investigation. She didn't seem to match any of those descriptions. She was very cool, calm, and collected, and very organized.
Detectives begin to get more specific with Delgado.
This is the picture of the young lady that got killed. Never seen her before?
I've never seen her.
Okay.
First, they started with Kendra Hatcher. Do you know this person? No, I've never met her. Well, she's engaged to Ricky Patiago. Do you know him? Oh, well, yes, Ricky and I are very close, but we're just friends now.
Detective Barnes needs to find out more about the vehicle used when the murder occurred.
I began to press her on who had had this Jeep. So when I pressed her on her location and whether she was driving the Jeep, she pointed a finger at Crystal and said, "You need to talk with her."
Detectives now bring Brenda's friend, Crystal Cortez, in for questioning.
So she is in the police headquarters at the same time Brenda is, and they're interviewing both of them, taping both of them, and then super helpful for information back and forth.
There was a lot of different stories from Crystal. The first version was that she was looking for a parking space because she was going out to eat in a nearby restaurant. And she just happened to park inside the parking garage at the Gables 17. And she heard a loud noise and decided to leave the parking garage.
When I was up there, I heard a shot. I have my son in the back. So I said, no, you know what? Let me get out. I'm coming out. There's a guy running with a mask right in front of me. He stops, he looks dead at me, and I'm just like, horrid. I'm shaking, literally, at this point, because I have my son in the back.
I confronted her with the fact that I actually saw someone get out of her vehicle and walk towards Dr. Hatcher.
Immediately, Crystal's story changes.
Crystal starts making up stories about she was just driving along the park with her son, and this scary man jumped in and told her to drive or he was going to kill her. And then she drove to the apartment complex and had no idea what happened.
However, she's confronted with the fact that there's no sign of anyone who could be considered to be her son on the tape.
Who else was in the vehicle with you?
Just my son, and he was asleep in the back, honestly.
No. That's not gonna work either. I want to be able to trust you, and I want to be able to believe you. And I know that what you're telling me is not true.
She switched up the story to be this friend of Brenda's and her drove into the apartment complex, and the motive was going to be robbery, and then she was just going to drive the getaway car, and they were going to be away with some money, and she was going to get $500, and they were going to scare Kendra.
But Crystal Cortez has done no more than implicate herself.
When Crystal admitted that Brenda paid her $500 to go to the parking garage with this unknown male who was armed with a firearm, she self-admitted she put herself at the crime scene. That was enough to charge her. We charged her with capital murder.
Meanwhile, Brenda is still being interviewed by detectives.
The more I watched Brenda Delgado, the more I just knew she was lying. They kept the film running when they would like leave the room or like, you know, do you want to take a bathroom break or do you want some snacks or whatever? So they were friendly to her, but there would be times when she was on camera by herself, the detectives were out of the room, talking to Crystal Cortez. She was just like, oh. And she was doing things like this, and I think she was realizing the trouble that she had stepped into and that what was happening while the detectives were interviewing her.
Agent Barnes now turns up the heat on Delgado.
I began pressing Brenda really hard about where she was at, what she was doing, and why they were there, and what they were there for. And I think that once I began pressing buttons, Brenda felt like she was gonna unravel and end up being charged, and she just asked for an attorney.
Brenda clearly hasn't been to the scene of the murder. Detectives don't have enough evidence to charge her, but instinctively they know she is involved in some way.
They felt they did not have enough to issue a warrant for arrest for murder, but they wanted to hold her. They ran her background check, and she had a whole bunch of parking violations, enough to be arrested.
Collectively, we decided it would be better to just put her in jail for her traffic tickets than to charge her with murder and have to release her if we couldn't find enough details to prove it at that point.
But Brenda has other plans.
As soon as somebody comes down here, or she on her own pays the $300 or $400 that's owed, whatever's the fine that's not paid, as soon as you pay that, they release you immediately. And so it's not like you're sticking them in jail on some kind of a serious charge where they're going to have to wait and see a judge, and you're going to have to go through at least an 18-hour process. You're putting her in there, she's going to be out potentially in a couple, 2 to 4 hours, which she was.
We found out that she left jail, she called a taxi to a local hospital, and she called her father and asked her father to pick her up.
Within hours, Brenda Delgado flees the state and crosses the border into Mexico.
She already had her backup plan in place, and at that point, we were just playing catch-up.
Detectives now believe that Brenda Delgado is at the center of the murder of Kendra Hatcher.
All of the early indicators on this investigation seem to point back to Brenda. Jose didn't know Kendra. Crystal didn't know Kendra. It all pointed back at Brenda. Brenda had the motive to want Kendra dead.
In Dallas, Texas, police are hunting for Brenda Delgado, a suspect in the murder of 35-year-old dentist Kendra Hatcher. Delgado has fled to Mexico, but investigators are continuing to question Crystal Cortez, Delgado's accomplice, who drove the Jeep from which the killer emerged to shoot Kendra. However, they are still trying to identify the shooter.
Just crunching down phone records between Brenda, Crystal. We also located a phone inside Brenda's apartment. We got phone records for that number, and all of these phones had a common phone number that they were communicating with. And we were able to locate that phone number and do some subpoenas for the phone records on that phone.
Police reach out to federal agencies for assistance.
The FBI got involved about a month after it happened. At the time, they hadn't identified the shooter in the case. They only knew him as Chris, so they were looking for help in that regard. They had a telephone number for Chris. We were able to obtain a search warrant to obtain the real-time location information associated with that phone. The pings on the phone brought us to an apartment complex in South Dallas.
That same day, Crystal is brought in for further questioning.
So there was the blue Sebring part right there.
Okay, was it an older looking Sebring?
No, this is like, it's your, maybe
like this color blue or dark blue?
No. It's a shiny blue.
She gives me a description of the shooter's car, and she said he drives a blue Chrysler Sebring. I picked my phone up and I called the FBI agents that were doing surveillance out in this parking lot and gave them the car description, and they told me that they see the car in the same parking lot. By watching the phone pings, they noticed the phone started moving, and they also noticed that the blue Chrysler Sebring was moving at the same time that the cell phone was moving. And it pulls over in a parking lot a couple blocks away from this apartment complex, and they walk up to him and make contact.
The man is Christopher Love. He is taken into custody and the car is impounded.
The car was towed to the auto pound, and I began interviewing Christopher Love. I interviewed him all the way through the course of the night into the early morning hours of October 2nd.
Searching the car, they didn't really find anything, and it was a little bit of a dead end.
Detectives have drawn a blank, so they turn to another police resource to intensify the investigation.
A canine that was in training at the time was brought to the Dallas Auto Pound. The canine had been trained to find explosives. That could be anywhere from gunpowder to bomb material C4.
They sniffed the car. The dog wisely stopped at a couple places. They found some residue, but they didn't find enough evidence yet. And then the dog zoomed in on the console in between the driver's and passenger seat, up one side and down the other. So that was super helpful. The investigators were able to remove the panel, and lo and behold, what's in there? A gun.
Christopher Love is confronted with what the canine has managed to uncover.
Once I showed him a picture of the firearm, it was like somebody letting the air out of a balloon. His body language, he just kind of sunk down in his chair. His head dropped. He tells me, okay. I was there. I was with Crystal. I got out of the Jeep to walk over to get Kendra's purse, and Crystal fired a shot from the Jeep out the window, and it hit Kendra. And he goes back into the Jeep and they drive away.
But Detective Barnes knows better.
I saw the video, and what he was describing was a scene out of a James Bond movie. There was no way that Crystal could throw the car in reverse, shoot out a passenger window while backing up, hit someone in the head, and one shot get it done. And also the magazine to the firearm was laying next to the body. So I knew that my shooter was there close range and standing beside Kendra whenever she died.
There's a video camera from the parking garage on the other side. And that's how I know which side of the vehicle you got out of, and only one person got out of that vehicle.
I hopped in the driver's.
That one person that got out,
outside,
the one person that got out of that vehicle was you.
I actually pressed him a little bit about being the shooter. And when he didn't feel like there was any way out, and there's no way to explain it other than to tell the truth, he asked for a lawyer.
Well, I can tell you, man, that as far as this thing goes, that
And so once he terminated the interview, I went back to my desk and began typing his murder warrant, capital murder warrant, and he knocked on the door again. He wanted to sit and talk with me, and I told him I had to read his Miranda warning again if he wanted to talk, and he said okay. And he just wanted to ask me one question. He wanted to know, why did we let Brenda go? I thought it was pretty significant. I thought that was him saying, hey, you got me, now I want you to get her.
Crystal Cortez is also bowing to the inevitable.
I really want to go home to my baby.
You're not trying to cover for
No, I'm not
anybody?
covering anybody. I don't want nothing to do with this. I want to go home now. I really do. I want to go to my baby, okay?
I understand that.
I'm trying to, I'm helping you guys with everything I can. I just want to go home to Ivan, okay?
That's, well,
I know you guys are trying to help me. I'm trying to help you out. I'm not trying to cover for anybody.
So Crystal was charged with capital murder. At some point, she agreed to a deal. The deal was, if you are truthful and if you can testify against Brenda, we will recommend you for 35 years to life. You will be pleading guilty to capital murder.
They needed Crystal to get to Brenda. It's the only opportunity for her. 17 and a half years, you're eligible for parole. You may or may not get it, but you're eligible. She's got a child, she's got to be thinking about a whole lot of things, and she doesn't want to be locked up till the day she dies.
She was the one that kind of put the pieces together for law enforcement, kind of explained what happened and allowed law enforcement to arrest the other people that were involved in it.
Detectives know they have Crystal and Christopher, but now the spotlight turns to Brenda Delgado. They strongly suspect that she has manipulated the other two.
One of the things that I learned working this case, that Brenda was very good at reading people. She was able to sit down with someone, figure out who that person was, figure out where they were at in life, and specifically what they needed in life.
It was a business transaction for them. Should we beat him up? Should we kill her? Should we... they just handled it as if it was business.
She actually offered Crystal $500. At the time, Crystal was a single mother. She was out of work because her vehicle wasn't working, and she needed some mechanic work done to her vehicle, and she didn't have the money to get it done. Brenda was able to figure out that she needed money to be able to go to work every day and take care of her child, and so she just kind of dangled that carrot in front of Crystal to get her to participate in this murder.
And it is becoming apparent that Brenda had lied to Christopher in order to manipulate him even further.
Christopher Love was a self-proclaimed low-level drug dealer that just moved to this Dallas area, and he wanted to be Scarface. He was looking forward to being the next up-and-coming drug dealer in Dallas, and Brenda picked up on that, and that's what she offered him. She told Christopher that she was part of the drug cartel and that Kendra was actually stealing drugs from the cartel, and if he participated in this murder, that he get a life time's supply of drugs.
At the center of everything appears to be Brenda's jealousy of Ricky's newfound happiness with Kendra.
I think her obsession with Kendra Hatcher and losing Dr. Paniagua was stronger than anything she could think of. She just had one goal in mind, and that was to either hurt Dr. Paniagua, which was one of the very first things that came into their minds, or remove Kendra Hatcher from the picture.
On Brenda's phone, we looked into the notes portion of her phone, and we found an email address for Ricardo and also a password. Based on our interviews with Crystal told us that Brenda was able to track Ricardo, and she was able to know where he was at.
When Ricky and Brenda were hooking up the second time around, Ricky was still helping her, so they had a joint cell phone account, and apparently that account gave her access to his phone online. She had put tracking software on his phone. She was able to know where that phone was, where he was.
She would find his location and she would go and watch him. And then she would go have casual encounters where she would randomly bump into him and have conversations with him.
And her obsession also extended to Kendra.
In Brenda's phone, she had a bunch of pictures and videos she downloaded from Kendra's Facebook page. She had been stalking Ricardo and Kendra at the same time, just kind of staying up with their relationship. And I think she used social media as a way just to kind of figure out what they were doing.
It is becoming clear that Brenda was going to do whatever it took to achieve her objective.
Not only had she approached Crystal Cortez and Christopher Love, we interviewed some people that she had approached before about trying to convince them to do the same thing. Namely her cousin, having him attack Kendra Hatcher with a baseball bat. He ultimately declined to do so. So she had been trying to find someone who would carry this out for some time.
Crystal had got in deep and was doing what Brenda wanted.
And speaking with Crystal, she told me that she started going around just talking to people that they knew about, where they could get a gun, and also if they would be willing to help them in this murder. And through a mutual friend, a gentleman by the name of Kelly Ellis, Kelly knew Christopher Love and he introduced them.
For whatever reason, they just fell in and the ball started rolling and Crystal started agreeing to these things, and she found a shooter for Brenda. She agreed to drive the getaway vehicle. She helped Brenda get rid of evidence after the fact for $500 and some drugs.
Delgado was across the border, in her mind, safe from the authority of U.S. law enforcement.
My arrest authority ends in the state of Texas, and I think Brenda knew that. She felt like she was out of reach of the Dallas Police Department, but what she didn't plan for was that we have a partnership with the FBI, and they've got worldwide jurisdiction.
When people try to flee the U.S. to another country to escape justice, that always is a thorn in my side. So I always give those cases a little extra attention because I want to make sure that these people get caught and brought back to the U.S. I don't want people thinking that they can flee our borders and not answer the charges that are brought against them.
The FBI felt like the longer that she was free, the longer that she was evading law enforcement, that we were at risk for her committing another offense.
Dallas police now moved to make Brenda Delgado an international fugitive from justice.
We were able to get her on the FBI most wanted list. I was pretty excited about it because I knew that I would get my shot at her again.
In 2016, Dallas police and the FBI are continuing their investigation into the murder of 35-year-old dentist Kendra Hatcher. Investigators have apprehended the man who pulled the trigger, Christopher Love, and the getaway driver, Crystal Cortez. However, they are still searching for the woman they believe orchestrated the crime, Brenda Delgado, who is a fugitive in Mexico and on the FBI's most wanted list. Detectives and agents now intensify their search for Delgado.
We started interviewing extended family members to see if we could get any cooperation from them. Initially, we weren't successful. They didn't want to cooperate, but ultimately some of them did. And that was very helpful in ultimately locating her.
I believe the phone was instrumental in tracking. They were able to pick up who she was calling and where money transfers were being made for her to have money to live on out there.
We received information that her family was sending her money via some money transfer business, and we were able to corroborate some of that. We saw some money going down to a state in Mexico where we knew she had relatives.
This information is further corroborated by a tip directly to investigators.
We received information that Brenda was at a specific location in Mexico, and the tipster began providing detailed information of where Brenda was at.
It allowed us to identify her exact location in Mexico, and we relayed that to the Mexican Interpol officers, and they arrested her, within hours after we passed on that information.
Texas authorities moved to extradite Brenda Delgado from Mexico to the United States.
It's a long process to do that. I mean, our State Department has to reach out to whoever's the comparable authority in Mexico City. I mean, I don't remember how long that process took, but I mean 6 months to a year. I mean, it was a good while.
For the process to work, certain conditions must be met.
Brenda was a dual citizen, Mexico citizenship and American citizenship. And Mexico has a standing policy that they do not extradite any of their nationals, any of their citizens, into a death penalty situation.
The deal was that she would not be put to death here in the States. So in order for us to apprehend her and bring her back, we had to agree to that.
We flew to Mexico on October 5th of 2016. We met Mexican authorities in a hangar at the airport. We searched her. We placed the restraints on her that she would be wearing on the flight. We were able to board the flight before any of the other passengers through the back entrance and flew back to Dallas-Fort Worth Airport nonstop.
I actually met her when she arrived here. I was the first face that she saw when she walked in the airport hangar. I'm a pretty competitive person, and even though I didn't get a chance to interview her again, in my mind, I was like, I told you I was gonna get you.
Prosecutors now need to prepare for 3 trials: Brenda Delgado, Crystal Cortez, and Christopher Love.
I've been working in the Dallas Homicide Unit for a little over 9 years. And out of every murderer that I've come across, Christopher Love is about as cold as any murderer that I've dealt with. No sign of remorse, no sign of emotion, no sign of regret.
This is a vicious, vicious, vicious person.
Christopher Love was sentenced to death. He's still on death row from what I understand, and I don't know if a date's been set yet for that.
Crystal Cortez's fate has already been more or less agreed.
Crystal was charged with capital murder as well, based on her agreement to testify against Christopher and also to testify against Brenda. She was given 35 years in prison.
In the case of Brenda Delgado, prosecutors paint a picture of a ruthless manipulator.
They did a great job at pointing out the specific facts of this investigation and just kind of like laying out who Brenda was. You know, that she's not just this pretty face that you see sitting in a courtroom, that this lady's a monster.
I don't think she even thought much about covering her tracks. It was all about getting this done. This focus of, I need to get Kendra Hatcher out of the way so I can get Ricky back.
Brenda had a very blank look on her face, almost like she was in disbelief that she was actually sitting in this courtroom and that she was being held accountable for what she did.
I don't really know that she felt right and wrong. I don't really know that she felt any guilt. The best word I can come up with is sociopathic.
She just appeared to be very nonchalant and like everything was okay, and it would be until the very end.
When the jury deliberate, they aren't long about coming to a decision.
So I was going down the escalator, and this is, I mean, we're less than 20 minutes since the jury went out, and I get a text message, we've got a verdict.
I think we startled some folks. We came back in a half an hour. It was not flippant, however. It was not off the cuff. We came back into the jury room, and someone suggested that we take a sample vote. This is the gut check vote. Let's just write down what we think, and then we'll start talking about it. So a woman volunteered to capture the notes. We all wrote down what we thought, and she opened them up, and they were all in one pile, one after the other. Guilty, 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 guilty.
That's very unusual. In a capital murder case, for the jury to come back, I heard estimates of 18 to 20 minutes that they deliberated. Yeah, that's unheard of. So they were convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that she committed this crime. First and foremost, this was a Dallas Police Department homicide investigation. And everybody understood their roles, and everybody understood that the primary goal was to identify everybody who was involved in this murder for hire and to get everybody arrested and in a courtroom to face the charges against them. And I think every agency did a great job at that.
I think working cases like this just makes it hard for you to trust individuals. But on a positive note, it's kind of offset by all the positives that I learned from working with the family and also the detectives on this case.
There may be a victory of sorts in the convictions, but for the family of Kendra Hatcher, there is just loss.
The thing that bothered me the most about this case was this could have been anyone. Kendra is a truly innocent victim, and she never saw any of this coming. For her to be ambushed and assassinated in a parking garage like an animal, it bothered me. And it is one of those things that you just never forget.
It's such a senseless, tragic loss of life that didn't need to happen. Just the lengths that someone would go to try to get back with an ex-boyfriend. That's very chilling, and it's a stark reminder of kind of the world we live in.
Nothing anyone can do will bring Kendra Hatcher back, and for her family, the pain of losing her endures.
For the family, I don't feel there's closure. The word is a great word. We hear it and we think curtains are shut and we can no longer see what's behind them. But I do not believe that there is true closure in a case like this.
Their daughter, sister, was taken from them in an instant, without any warning and without any reason. So I don't know how you come to terms with that. It's got to be extremely difficult.
We can never bring back Kendra, but we can say, hey, we got the people that were responsible.